Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals, where we dive into the heart of the legal profession to bring you unfiltered discussions with industry titans on a broad spectrum of topics.
Hello and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I am your host today, Emma, and I am joined by Dr Maria Pozza. Maria is the Director of Gravity Lawyers, and we're very excited to have her here on the podcast. Not only did she recently feature in our InView magazine, but you've got an incredibly inspiring and unique legal career, which I'm very excited to just talk more about. So before we get into all of that, I'd love to hand over to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I guess, your journey to today.
Kia ora, Emma, thank you so very much for inviting me to come and chat with you today. And I'm so excited to be talking to you about the weird and wonderful world of space law. And so obviously, yes, I'm the Director of Gravity Lawyers, and at Gravity Lawyers, we specialize in space law. We do a little bit of cyber, privacy, data, technology as well, because of course, all of these areas interface in the weird and wonderful world of space law. So you sort of need to be able to navigate through those areas when looking at space law. Emma, space law is multi-dimensional in the sense that we're not just dealing with domestic New Zealand law, we're really getting into the of international space law as well. And you can add a little bit of space policy, domestic policies, as well as international policy, all pertaining to space. So there's a lot to grapple with. And every day it's really, really exciting. And honestly, I keep learning new things every day. So the journey to space, Emma, I think that was your question, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'm just so excited to be here. So I think that was your question, what was the journey to space? Look, it's been a really, really interesting, challenging, but very rewarding journey. I came from the UK. I was called to the bar of Lincoln's in England and Wales, and then came over here to New Zealand, cross-qualified, did a master's, did a PhD, looked at the issue of space. I have been looking at space since 2009, 2010, and I've been trying to engage with our various government agencies back then about New Zealand having its own space law. Each time, there were challenges along the path because, of course, everyone thought to themselves, New Zealand, why would New Zealand need space law? But of course, New Zealand's a great place to be for space-based activities, launches, payloads. We're very innovative here as well. We've got great hubs of people undertaking various technologies. And of course, we have got this growing space sector now. But of course, back then, Emma, I don't know if you can imagine someone who said, oh, hi, can I have a meeting with the local MP, with the minister or government agencies, or talking to your peers at conferences and say, I'm looking at space law and New Zealand needs to have its own space law. Honestly, Emma, I think most people must have thought it's completely mad. So there were a few times a couple of people did laugh at me and asked me, no, really, what, don't you focus in a serious area of law? But look, it is serious. Emma, do you have a mobile phone?
Yes.
I don't know anyone who doesn't have one of these.
No.
Very, very, we live and depend on this thing. We're using a satellite. Every day, our daily lives are linked to a space asset in some shape or form. I always like to say to people, did you check the weather today? I mean, I did, I needed to make sure that my hair was in the right style. If it was going to rain, I was going to wear it up. And if it wasn't going to rain, I'm going to wear it down. But of course, I use the satellite to check the weather.
Yeah, wow, of course.
We use space asset every day. And so slowly but surely since 2009-10, I've been managing to get people on board. And then, of course, in 2016, we had our first launch here. And then in the rounds for 2016, 2017, I'm very proud to say that the legislation finally made its way here in New Zealand, and we have our own Space Act, and lots of great things are happening. Emma, I'm talking and talking and talking.
No, it's
Please.
So good.
I'm so sorry, I could go on for days.
I think myself and anyone listening has probably just got so many questions in their brain now. And we are going to talk about the legal side of space, but I would love to know, if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing? Like, my brain's like, surely she wants to be an astronaut, she wants to do something in space, but what would you be doing if you weren't practicing law?
Emma, I've been asked this question before.
Yeah.
And I'm really surprised whenever I ask them about peers, what would you do if you weren't a lawyer? What did you want to be? Everyone wanted to be something else. Emma, I never had a plan B.
Yeah.
From when I was very, very small and could speak, what do you want to be? Everyone else wanted to be something really interesting. A lawyer.
Oh,
Always
wow.
a lawyer.
Yeah.
It was no plan B. It was always the path for me. So
Amazing.
honestly, as early as I can remember, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And it wasn't something that I fell into or considered alongside other options. I
Mm.
never entertained alternatives. Law wasn't a career choice. It was a calling. I was
Yeah.
always going to be a lawyer. So, yeah, I'm really sorry to tell you such a
No, that's
boring story that it was always going to be law for me.
No, I love that. And I love that it has come, you've gone on to succeed and be a lawyer. I think that's an amazing story. I think it's so rare now to have that calling and that no from when you were young. I definitely didn't experience that. And I think it is kind of refreshing to hear of these people that have these dreams that go on to do them and live them. And you're absolutely doing it now. So can you tell us about a pivotal time or moment in your life that kind of shaped your approach as a legal leader, whether that was kind of what triggered you to go down the route of space or whether it's just your journey in general? I'd love to hear a little bit more about your personal story.
Yeah, sure. Look, I always wanted to be a lawyer, so there was no two ways about that. Getting into space law certainly came a little bit later on in the piece. I won't say how much later on because I always think I'm still young. But certainly, there's two parts to this story, really, and I'll keep it brief. The first part is the actual journey to being a lawyer.
Mm,
As I say, there was never any alternative. I was always going to be a lawyer. I had my mind set on. But some pivotal moments that sort of shaped the way I approach law as a lawyer, and perhaps maybe the first one was sitting in court as a student on no lecture days. Don't know about you, Emma, but when I did my law degree, and I don't know about some of our listeners, when they did their law degrees, on days that you didn't have lectures, sometimes, you'd sit in the library, do your work, or sometimes you'd work on your assignments, what have you. Sometimes I would go and sit in court in the public gallery and just see what was happening. I'd go and have a look
mm,
and just sit in there. And I remember thinking at the time, as a student of law, I have no idea what on earth is going on. I understand why this person is here on trial or in front of the judge or whatever it may be. I have no idea what the lawyer is saying.
mm.
And, for me, that was actually quite a pivotal moment because it's quite powerful when you have that insight into the accessibility and communication gap in law.
Yeah.
We train for a long time to understand this terminology, to understand law. It is a language of its own. But at that time, I just remembered thinking, does the person who's standing in front of the judge here understand what on earth is happening?
Mm.
Their liberty could be at stake. There could be fines at stake. And that was one of the really big pivotal moments for me, that actually communication is critically important as lawyers. We've got to be clear, not only when we're speaking to judges or in courtroom procedures, obviously, and there is a way in which evidence has to be presented and terminology that has to be used. But certainly with our clients and stakeholders, we've got to be incredibly clear. They don't speak legalese.
Yes.
So that was a first pivotal point. A second pivotal point for me was, look, I am not many people know this, but when I did my law degree, I went and did an internship in Huntsville, Texas, and worked on death row cases.
Oh, wow.
So, look, for me, and working in Texas, obviously, where the death penalty is pursued, and of course, you're dealing with people's lives.
Mhm.
It's not just about liberty; it's lives. There's certainly it's certainly really important to have to be critical and clear in your thinking, to have empathy, and you've got to have a lot of precision in your work, especially when lives are on the line. So that was another pivotal moment for me that shaped my thinking as a lawyer. Now, closer to home as well, my parents are business owners, and of course, they're migrants. They're from Italy. You can tell by my dark features. I must have some European somewhere, and I'm Italian by background. So for my parents as business owners, this was one of the other elements. After I'd finished my degree and started training as a lawyer, and even being here in New Zealand, as business owners, sometimes I was flabbergasted by, and it's not just lawyers in this instance, but professional advisors who were not undertaking the work as an advisor, a trusted advisor. And what I mean by that is sometimes the advice that was given to my parents wasn't really that great. It wasn't very strategic. It wasn't always thinking of them, their position first, their best interest. And when you think about it, Emma, when you're a lawyer and you come straight into this job, people implicitly just trust you immediately. As soon as they sit down, they tell you everything. Sometimes you wish, don't tell me too much, please. But of course, they tell you everything. We have that position of trust. And so that was another pivotal point for me as trusted advisor. We've got to do absolutely right by our client. We've got to jealously guard our clients, and we've got to do the very best we can for them. Pivotal moment for space, though. Emma, I wish I had a great story, like a piece of space debris, fell out of the sky. And the guy next to me, an apple hit him. I wish I had a great story like that. Look, I don't. I touched a little bit on space law in the UK. I used to do a lot of work in the military sector, as a not in the military as such, but, a lot of military courts martial work. And of course, there was always the element of space in some of the work that was undertaken. Certainly here in New Zealand, there was no element of space. And when I tried to get a job in New Zealand, Emma, because I didn't have the cross qualifications at the time, I couldn't get a job. And so I was told, well, go and get your cross qualifications. Okay, I'll go get my cross qualifications. And, to be fair, I was still new, 2-3 years, into my experiences from the UK. But of course, I cross qualified very quickly, did those exams. And then no, I couldn't get a job because I had no New Zealand experience. So
oh gosh,
I thought to myself, this is insane. So I went and did a master's because I thought I'm going to take a whole new career direction. And we had to write a 20,000 word thesis because I did a master's by coursework. And I thought to myself, holy smokes, there's nothing in New Zealand about space law, and this is so critically important. So, of course, I decided to write my 20,000 words. And look, from there, it sort of escalated. I was incredibly lucky to receive some very prestigious funding awards from all sorts of, the University of Otago Scholarship, the Lauterpacht Fellowship, University of Cambridge, all sorts of awards, Cloud McCarthy as well. Look, really, really, really lucky to receive those awards and be able to do a PhD in space law. And look, that's how that's how space and me started working together daily. So, yes, it's a bit of a journey. It's a 2-part journey.
It's really interesting because I think without maybe having known all of that, you would think, oh, you've just always been in love with space. You're passionate about space. You wanted to just have a career in space. But that's not the case. You actually had, a number of roles before you kind of became this specialist in space law and then kind of did all this amazing work in New Zealand to make it a thing as well. So if we think about your background, it's so varied in it, from in-house to private practice, the UK, New Zealand, you've kind of touched a lot of different areas. You've started your own law firm. You've brought some, a new type of law to a country. Like, these are huge things that you've done. And I'd love to know what are some of the biggest challenges you have faced during that time and how did you overcome them? I think, for a lot of our audience, they're in-house professionals. They're working in various industries. I don't know if we have many space lawyers. I think you might be the only one. But, we all come across these challenges in our careers. We all face things that we have to overcome. And I would love to know a little bit more about what that's looked like for you.
Sure. Look, I should say, first of all, I'm excited. I think we're going to see more and more space lawyers, which is wonderful. So yes, that's a good thing. But for our in-house lawyers listening in, hey, look, some of the challenges I had was, I think most people thought I had lost my mind when I said I was working in space. People would laugh at me. Our peers would laugh at me. For me, one of the biggest challenges was being your own cheerleader. And that's definitely something I think for our in-house legal teams. Sometimes it's really hard when you're working with your stakeholders, and sometimes stakeholders, they're looking at something from a revenue perspective, and let's not beat around the bush. Money is really important to an organization, but so is compliance as well. So sometimes you get into that position, it's quite awkward where you're not trying to be the brakes on something, but you're certainly doing your best to protect the client, put the client's interest first. And so you do have to put these awkward questions back to your stakeholder. Have you thought about this? What if we could change that? Then this might, then it brings us better, better in alignment with compliance. Now, certainly for me, and as I say, that's a bit of a awkward shift, but from what I was saying at the beginning, but certainly for me, one of the challenges was being my own cheerleader. And I think the message in what it is that I'm trying to say here is that our in-house legal teams have to stand strong. You have to be your own cheerleader. You have to say, yes, all right, I'm not going to be the favorite person, but I'm acting with integrity. I believe in what it is I'm doing. I believe this is important, and I believe that this is the correct way of going about it. Then it's taking people on a journey. Look, when people used to laugh at me when I talked about space law, it really, really got to me. And I kept saying to myself, no, this is important. This is important. Do you know what, Emma? I just changed the way I was communicating with people.
Okay.
I'd start the conversation with, well, yes, I deal with space law. Oh, that's not a real area of law, is it? And I said, well, actually, have you got a mobile phone like we did earlier, Emma? Yes, I have got a mobile phone. You're using a space asset. Holy smokes, I am too. Now, did you know?
Yeah.
And at that time, I might say New Zealand doesn't have space law. And I think we need to have it. Or I might say, but there's lots of international law in space. And space law, it has to reflect as well our, security, our national security, our commercial issues. And then people started getting engaged. So one of the takeaways here is that, yes, I probably could have really taken it to heart when people didn't think I was serious in my area of law. And I could have probably taken it to heart when a lot of people didn't want to meet with me and talk about establishing space law. But if you truly believe in your posture, you've got to be your own cheerleader. You've got to be able to bounce back. And then you've got to be able to just ask yourself, how do I change my communication? How do I bring people on board with me? Let me take you on the journey, why I think this is important and why I think you need to think about this and you need to look at this and think it's important. So that's probably one of the areas that I might say to that question over that for some of our in-house counsel, it's the journey, it's the communication, tell the story, keep it factual, but take people on the journey with you, get them excited about what it is that you're talking about and why you're taking the position you're taking.
I love that. And it actually goes back to what you said at the start around like when you went to the courtroom and you like sat there, someone who was studying law and had no idea what these people were saying. And I think we're trained to speak in a certain way at law school. And then you almost, when you go in-house, need to untrain that and learn how to just talk like a normal human being, but still get across quite complicated legal points.
Yes.
So it's such a balancing act. And I think that's such a good point you make, because it's not necessarily that people aren't interested, but maybe it's the way that you're communicating the information that's just not resonating, or it's not feeling relevant, or I think it's such a good point. And I think there'd be many people probably nodding their heads being like, yeah, I probably don't communicate things the best way, if you think about it from someone who's not got a legal background at all.
But Emma, you've said that so eloquently. Thank you. Anyone listening in, just listen to Emma's bit. You don't listen to my rambling. But you're right. Sometimes it's the case of retraining ourselves how to speak English and plainly that.
Oh, it's so true. I still remember when I first came out of practicing law into a non-legal role, and I wrote an email to someone, and the way that I'd written the email, they were like, oh my God, like it's so cold and be a human, like don't be a robot. And I was like, just had written, that's how I was trained to write an email as a lawyer. And then not being a non-lawyer, I was like, oh, I can just talk like myself now. What?
No, it's a really, really fair point. Honestly, sometimes when I send emails to my family as well, my mum won't ring me up and say, I'm not a client.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I have to say to you, that's just not right. But of course, sometimes we do have to pinch ourselves, and sometimes we have to say, right, how do I write this in English and not legally?
Yes.
Sometimes you do need to write in legally because it's important to file the advice. But equally, again, tell the story, take your stakeholders on the journey, get them excited in a positive way, what it is you're trying to do and why they need to care about it.
I love that. Such great advice. So when you're talking about space, you mentioned that there is just so much else, that it's not just space, there's technology, there's AI, there's all these different components that kind of come under space law. So I feel like you're someone that really is at the forefront of technology and what's happening. So I'd love for you to maybe share with our listeners what you think the legal profession needs to have on its radar over the next 10 years and how you think that will affect the roles of lawyers, being private practice or in-house, just, generally.
Look, it's such a good question. And I think everyone's probably already thinking AI, technology, but more fundamentally, something that I'm seeing a lot is the art of the in-house lawyer to do a lot more with a lot less. I'm sure there's people listening in to this podcast who are probably shaking their heads. Resources are always stretched for in-house legal teams. There's never enough money. I used to like to say to stakeholders when I was in in-house roles, look, I'm the GP. I know when to give you antibiotics. I know when to send you home. I know, I know enough to be dangerous in the sense that I know when to refer you to an expert. But of course, for a lot of in-house teams, there's just not enough funding, or I say funding, but resources anyway, to be able to send to an expert in a particular area that maybe you don't have a lot of experience in. And we can't be experts in everything. Absolutely, we can't. And that's why we do this. So something that I think we're going to see is the ask of our in-house teams to not only become wider in scope of expertise. So you can't just be the general practitioner. You've got to be able to jump into some areas, be it data, privacy, leasing, property, whatever it is. You've got to be able to be broad spectrum and have an area that you do specialize in. Litigation's another good example as well. But equally, I think we're going to have to accept and embrace that technology and AI is here to stay. So let's talk about doing more with less. I always like to say to some of my friends who are in-house legal counsel, hey, look, do you have Microsoft 365? Are you using Google? There's a lot of tools in there that you can already utilize to assist you in automation, to do things a lot more quickly. And you can also, set up a form, for example, and get your stakeholders to fill it all in and they send it to you. And then using something like Power Automate, suddenly the folders are all suddenly created for you in the SharePoint and they're locked down for legal privilege. There's a lot you can do with what you already have. And do you know what? In a lot of organizations, they've already got people in the IT, in the operational IT infrastructure area who know how to utilize these products. So I think for us, it's a question now of our legal teams being open to having a look at what's available. You've got to be resource savvy. You've got to find what is available to you easily. And the last thing that I'm going to say as well is the ask again on in-house lawyers is not just to do more with less, but and also, be broader in application and as well have specific areas that you specialize in. But it's also really taking stock of the socio-political context in which our organization's operating. Because what I'm seeing more and more is you're no longer just the lawyer. You're now the risk advisor. You're now the compliance advisor. You're now the strategic legal risk compliance advisor. So there's a lot more demand on our in-house legal teams and in-house legal counsel. It's a challenging time, but wowee, what a great set of skills. What a great, really, really important dynamic position to be holding in an organization. It can be stressful, and that's where it's really important to be part of, in-house groups, joining and listening into podcasts like Interview and reading the magazine. But, it's really important to be part of the in-house community because everyone will share the same sentiments as you. So really engage with your fellow practitioners. And that's my best advice. We're going through a period of change. There's challenges, yes, but there are so many opportunities. I always like to say to people, challenges and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes you only see the challenges, but hey, if you turn the coin around, there's your opportunity. I'll pause there, Emma, because I'll keep going.
I know, I love that. And I love your positive outlook on it all as well, because I feel like sometimes it can all feel very doom, gloom. Oh my gosh, all this change, we're under resourced. And it's sometimes just a mindset shift to say, actually, there's a lot of opportunity here. So if we were to think about those opportunities and your journey into law, like what are some of the skills that you think might be helpful for in-house lawyers to be looking into now to really help them grow personally and their leadership capabilities? And I mean, it might be even things that you could share that you've been working on or, trying to upskill more about at the moment.
Look, I think for in-house legal teams and lawyers, we've got to think expansively. The world is changing. We've got to change with it, whether or not we like it. Kicking and screaming, we will change with it.
Yes.
We have to. We've got to stay curious. Honestly, whenever I see any courses that look like they might be interesting, I will, really seriously think about undertaking them. So, for example, it might be finance and operations. I don't know about you, Emma, but whenever I see a financial statement, I run for the hills.
You're same.
Me and the numbers, we are just not friends. And of course, one day I decided to just take hold of, get the bull by the horns. That's it. What is it that scares me so much about financial statements? And it's actually not a big deal. I did a quick course on it online. I've had a look. And it's not a big deal. And sometimes I think that's what we have to do. We have to think expansively. We've got to think broadly. We've got to ask ourselves, what is it that scares us? And then we have to say, right, I'm going to conquer this mountain. For me, it was financial statement and financial operations as well. And I've been able to expand my thinking now in credit, for example. So, every in-house lawyer has a credit team, has a finance team, has an operations team. But, the mysteries of the finance and the credit team, we all think, well, we don't want to get close to that. But of course, being brave and saying, right, I'm going to go and sit down with the stakeholder. What do you actually do in here? Let me see some of your documentation. Oh, you're using PPSR. You're using, leases. Oh, I see. You're actually using personal guarantees. And you have a look at some of this stuff and you have a look a little bit at the financial statements. You just take me through some of the company-wide budgets. How on earth do you tell the story from these numbers? Honestly, you'd be so surprised how much you can learn and how incredibly useful it is to you as a practitioner. It's all about knowing enough to be dangerous, Emma. We need to know enough to be dangerous. The other one as well is the sales team or the commercial team. Holy smoke. We've got to learn to speak sales. It's a whole new world out there for sales and the commercial team. I think maybe many in-house lawyers that might be listening in, they may find that a lot of their tensions come from the sales or the commercial team because, of course, they're revenue focused. We need to bring in the money.
Yes.
And we're not being a stopgap as such, but we're saying, yes, we understand you need to bring in the money, but we want you to do it in a way that is compliant.
Yeah.
And so there can be tensions there. Your job is to bridge the gap, not to block it, obviously, but equally your job is to act in the best interests of the client. So navigate, and that goes back to the communication piece, navigating with those teams and saying to them, this is why you should care, this is why it's important, can be really, really critically important in your role as in-house lawyer. And it may actually mean, right, I'm going to spend, a couple of days with the sales team or an hour with the sales team if you can. And if you've got hotspot desking, go and sit with the sales team. What are you doing? Do they need some training on competition, for example? Do they need some training on the contracts, the standard form contracts that we use? Do they need some training on the T's and C's? What our T's and C's say about the product that we offer to people? You can tell so much. I always like to say as well to people, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. I mean, I should take my own advice here, but you've got to listen more than you talk. And on that note, Emma, I am, yes, take us to the next one.
No, it's honestly, it's all such great advice. And I think is what I really like. Obviously you've got your own firm now, you're advising on space law, but you have got this background when you were an in-house lawyer and you're working in firms and you've got this, for a lot of it, you've been there, done that, and you've gone down this path now of, really specialize in space law, but the frustrations that in-house teams face. And I'm sure you're working with in-house teams, throughout your role as well in terms of advising and getting to know them a lot better. So I think they're all really important things to note. How do you personally balance the demands? We were talking about it, legal's been asked to do all these different things. They're wearing these different hats. They're taking on more and more and more. You run a business, but you're a lawyer. You run your own firm. You do all this kind of advocacy for space law. How do you balance being a business leader while also your ethical obligations as a legal professional?
Do you know, I'm going to be very controversial here, Emma, and people aren't going to agree with me, first of all, but I'm going to take everyone on the journey.
Do it.
The truth is, I don't believe there is a balancing act to be undertaken. I really don't. Our legal obligations must come first. Our client's best interest must come first. And as in-house lawyers, who you deem as your client, is it the board, is it the company, etc., must come first. And you must jealously guard that position. We are not here to align blindly with our stakeholders. We're here to offer independent and clear advice to our stakeholders. We do this so that we can help them make good strategic decisions. It may be the case we've given the legal advice, look, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to be complying with, let's just say, the Privacy Act, or you're not going to be complying with some other act, whatever it may be. If the business chooses to run the risk, then the business stakeholders should elevate that as they are required to do so. It may be that perhaps it needs to go to the board or whatever the case may be, but we're not there to align. We are there to tell the business, hey, if you do that, you're going to, fall foul of this. So really think it through. Is it possible to change the product, to change the strategic direction, maybe in this way or in that way? And we don't have to have all the answers, Emma, either. We don't have to be able to say in this way or that way. We can say, is it possible to make changes? Is it possible to apply something different? So we have to challenge thinking. We've got to illuminate risks. We've got to provide options that we can, that, is in our remit to do so, because we're not product experts. We're not sales experts. We're not experts in those areas. That's where the stakeholders need to come back and either think about an alternative strategy given the legal advice, or decide to run the risk and then pursue running the risk of what it is that they do, because the decision must rest with the client as to their next step. And sometimes it's so easy to lose sight of that. Sometimes we're trying so hard to get to yes for the client that sometimes I think we need to just take a step back and say to ourselves, our role is here to help people make good decisions. And to do that, we give the legal advice. So again, I always like to say to my friends anyway, who are in-house lawyers, and, even when I'm thinking about legal issues that come across my desk, is my job is not to align. My job is not to align blindly. My job is to make sure that we are looking at the legal issues. I'm giving you good advice on the legal issues. You need to tell me what your decision is, and I'm going to help you do what it is that you decide to do. So, as I say, probably a bit controversial, but I just don't see the need for a balancing act. I think this goes back to being your own cheerleader, standing strong in your position and holding steadfast and actually asking the hard questions, really batting it back to the stakeholders, saying to them, hey, look, I'm not taking a black and white approach to this, but this is where the issues are legally. Either rethink the product, rethink the strategy, or elevate in order to get sign off to undertake business risk. And that's where we have to go from there. So yeah, does that help? I mean, in my mind, it's actually really important, because then people understand that you're acting with integrity. You are acting with transparency as well. And in the long term, that really helps to build trusting relationships with our stakeholders, because all too often I hear how stakeholders come to it, the last minute. They come to their in-house lawyer at the last minute. They haven't told them anything about the product they're deploying. They come to the last minute, or they've already deployed it and there's been an issue and now we have to fix it. And I just always think to myself, actually, if we start as we mean to carry on, we lead with integrity, we're transparent in our advice, and we keep always at the forefront our legal obligations and the fact that we are there as legal advisors to help make good decisions, stakeholders to make good decisions, then actually you build that trusting relationship so much more deeply with stakeholders that you become a really important voice whenever at the beginning and whenever a new project's starting.
Mm. And I wonder if you've got so much clarity on this because you do navigate such an area which is maybe unclear at times and contentious. So you've really had to learn how to be so, what's the word I'm looking for? But, you just know your role so well as the advisor, and it's such a complicated area that people are often coming to you being like, can we do this? And if you said yes to everything, it would kind of, where would we be? I don't know. But do you think that maybe plays a part in how you've got to that like real clear thinking on how it sits with business and legal?
Look, first of all, thank you so much for the extremely kind compliment that you think I think clearly. Secondly, I do think maybe because of the diverse background that I do have, the areas of law that I have worked in, the positions that I've held, maybe that does all help to seeing things a little bit more clearly. But sometimes I can't see the wood from the leaves. I think that's the saying,
Yeah.
the trees from the leaves or whatever it is. Sometimes I can't. And that's where it becomes really important to have your own trusted, friends and your own trusted community of network of people where you can bounce ideas and you can say, in a situation where maybe something like this were to happen, without giving any too many details and keeping it, all above board. What are the type of things that you might consider, along the path? And sometimes, asking those sort of general questions, even saying things out loud can be so helpful. Emma, honestly, I talk to myself a lot and I think people must think I am mad. I'm now giving I'll sit here at my computer looking at something and I'll think, so why would,
Yeah.
you can hear that. Why would I do it that way though? I don't understand. If I did it that way, I'd be making X amount of money. I'd be doing this, but I'm going to fly in the face of whatever legislation. But if I do it this way, then it's very transparent. I'm making just as much money. Yeah, there's a bit more compliance work that needs to be undertaken. But do you know what? We're building really great trust as well with our customers. I have to say, the law is a logical beast. So whenever we are engaging in compliance, it's always really great for customers in any event because we become a really trusted brand as in-house lawyers. It was, as an in-house lawyer, that's certainly something that I would think about. We become a trusted brand. So yes, maybe it is that. And the other thing too is people would always say to me, oh, well, our competitors are doing it. And I would say, yeah, okay. So if our competitors jumped up a bridge or, did this, I probably shouldn't say that, but, if our competitors did this or did that, would we also follow, something that, wasn't very good for us? Would we follow? No, exactly. So, let's think this through. And sometimes as well, the other part of the story is, well, if we do what our competitors do, then we're just sort of the same. But why don't we be dynamic?
Yeah.
Why don't we be different? It's our unique selling point. Why would, let's go with this. This is great. We're giving you something really critically great and important. And guess what? We comply whilst doing it. X, Y, Z. It's a win-win. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Again, it's that coin, Emma, it's the challenges and opportunities. There's an opportunity here.
I love that. No, I think that's really great advice. I was actually just thinking as you were talking, and you were talking about community, and we've mentioned there's not much of a space community in New Zealand in terms of space lawyers. So how have you built, your circle around you for people? I'm guessing it's international. Like, how do you make those connections? Because I think that can be sometimes hard for people as well when you're sitting in an in-house team and you're feeling very siloed and you're not really sure where to go, how to approach people. Like, how did you build your community? Because I can imagine it's not a massive community either.
Certainly not a massive community in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
No.
But, and of course, given the hard, challenging starting point that people just thought I was mad when I'm dealing with space law, you're not going to find many people to bounce ideas with. I was really fortunate in the sense that when I did my PhD, I was able to access various scholarships and funding to present internationally. And of course, the Europeans and the US and most of a lot of other nations around the world already understood the importance of space. They already had lawyers that were specializing in space. And I built an international community before I built a domestic New Zealand community. Now, my community here in New Zealand is a lot of in-house lawyers and a lot of private practitioners too, which is great because, you make friends with people, you cross paths with people. It's great. But certainly, Emma, that was my experience, that I had to build my international community before the New Zealand domestic community was ready for the craziness and
Isn't that always just typical of New Zealand, though? Just always that little bit behind everything.
Well, it's a great place to be. And,
It is. It
it's
is.
people are innovative here. And, once everyone's on board and, then, you can't stop us. And of course, I do consider myself a New Zealander, I should say as well. So whilst, I came from UK and Italian background, I do consider myself a New Zealander always. So, and it makes me very proud to tell people that I consider myself a Kiwi.
Oh, no, that's so nice. I love that. So looking back at your career and, young self starting out your law career, dreaming of being a lawyer, is there a piece of advice you would give yourself now looking back to kind of, I don't know, something that you've learned on the way that you're like, if I'd known that at the start, that would have been really good?
Look, the journey's not easy.
No.
The calling to law is not easy. It is filled with sweat, blood, and tears. Emma, I'm not a hiker. I know a lot of people like hiking.
Yeah.
And I always, whilst I still won't ever do any hiking, I understand that people who undertake hiking, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of challenge in the terrain. You need energy. You need keep going. But the view from the top's pretty amazing. So I would certainly be saying to my younger self, and I think I probably already knew this. Again, I'm not into hiking, but I already knew that there would be challenges along this road. I don't think I ever thought it was ever going to be easy. As a dyslexic lawyer as well, you have to be you have to work very hard in order to find strategies and coping mechanisms in order to do the work that it is that I do.
Yeah.
So whilst still faced with those sorts of challenges and then, going into a niche area, something that I would say to myself is, hey, look, the view from the top's pretty amazing. So keep going. And that's what I would be saying to a lot of our in-house lawyers who sometimes it's really, really hard to keep the energy levels up. There's so many demands on our in-house lawyers. In fact, there's so many demands on our lawyers these days in any event. It's a stressful job. How do you keep going? And sometimes you've really got to dig deep and you've got to ask yourself, is this what I want to be doing? And more often than not, the answer is yes. And if it is, then it's time to dig your heels in, get your metaphorical hiking shoes on. Definitely for me, I get my metaphorical hiking shoes on and just keep going. I should say, on the hiking side as well, you have to accept that, yes, the view from the top is really, really great, but you do have to remember that you've got to make your way back down as well. That's also part of the journey. So we have to be able to just keep going up and down these mountains, and we have to build our resilience. We've got to be able to dig deep within ourselves. We've got to be able to say to ourselves, you can do this. You can do this. And it's so hard to ignore that really, really strong voice in your mind that says you can do this. So easy to think of, no, can't do it. Too difficult, too hard basket, no energy. I'm going to ask everyone listening, dig deep and say it with me out loud. You can do this. Really, really important. And if ever you get into a situation where you think, I'm just not cut out for this. I just can't do this. I want you to look in the mirror and say 3 times really loudly, even if you're at work, turn around to the person next to you and say, you can do this and I can do this and we can do this together.
I think do you know what? Your energy is amazing. And I can just see now, because you've talked about being your own cheerleader, like you've absolutely been that for yourself throughout your career. And no wonder you've done such amazing things and made huge progress in domestic and international law and had this amazing legal career because you absolutely have backed yourself. And I think that's one thing anyone at any stage of career can take from this conversation is just like the power of actually being able to do that and really just own what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. I think someone said it to me recently, and I'm probably going to get it wrong now, but it was just like, if you truly believe in something and back something, people will people will follow. You need to stick to your guns. You might not get the initial yes, it might be hard work, but if you truly believe in it and keep working at it, like, you will get that support. So I think it's a lot of things in life at the moment come easy, and there's just some things that are really worth working hard for, right?
Absolutely. And that sounds like great advice.
Yeah, I'm like,
Really,
who
really
gave
great
that to me? It might have actually been my manager, but I'll so I mean, you've kind of pathed your own career. You've paved your own way. But is there someone who has inspired you, whether that be inside or outside of work, to kind of, yeah, when it is hard, keep going, or someone you've looked up to? There might not be, but I'd love to know if there is someone.
crumbs. Look, do you know, I have to actually sit and think, and honestly, I'm coming up with a blank. I don't know many space lawyers. Well, excuse me, let me start again. I do know many space lawyers, but when starting out, didn't at the time, going into an area of space, into the space field, certainly I didn't know anyone. And of course, Emma, I don't come from a background or a family of professionals per se. So, dinner conversations were very different. My parents were always working. They had their own businesses, but, they weren't lawyers or accountants. So, our dinner conversations are probably very different from other people that did come from maybe a background, of professional families. So in my mind, it was really just a case of getting on, having the vision, carrying on. And so whilst that sounds cheesy, in the sense that, I haven't really got anyone in mind that I channeled my inner person to do this and to do that. I certainly would say that I just said yes to every opportunity that came across my desk. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to know as much as I could. I'm incredibly curious and very, very inquisitive. I always like to learn new things. And I think for me, that was the motivation. And it still is the motivation. What am I going to learn today? And who am I going to chat to today? That's going to make my day really exciting. Emma, for me today, it was chatting with you. Everything we're doing really exciting. Especially talking about some of my favorite things, which is, of course, space law.
Well, I was just about to say, I think this is probably the most interesting conversation I have for a very long time.
That's me outrageously. Thanks.
No, but I think it is so cool. You've really paved your way, and I'm sure there'll be lots of lawyers looking up to what you've achieved as well. So maybe, there wasn't that person for you, but I'm sure that you will be that person for many people. And I guess that's the hope, isn't it? Right? To bring more awareness, bring it to the forefront. It's truly amazing what you're doing. So I could keep talking. I have so many questions about space law, but without getting too much into the nitty gritty, we've got to keep it relevant for our in-house audience. I have just absolutely adored talking to you. Your energy, your just your story is really inspiring. And I think, like I said, if anyone takes anything from this conversation, it is just really to be your own cheerleader. So thank you so much for making the time to come and chat. I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so people can reach out, connect if they want to learn more about what you do.
Absolutely. I want to hear from everyone. Please do. I get my energy from people.
Yeah.
So yes, please reach out to me.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'll make sure to do that. Again, thank you so much. And I hope that we speak again soon, and we'll follow along your journey as well.
Thanks. Kia ora.
If you enjoyed listening, please hit follow and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. We love engaging with our community and hearing from you, so please head to inview.lawview.com. Thank you so much for tuning in.